Howdy folks, Luke here. It has always been my dream to build a cabin in the woods. My first cabin build was about exactly 10 years ago. It was in the summer of 2014 that I was working for my father installing doors and windows. I saved up all my money that summer and I bought a few 4x4s and a few 2x6s and put together a frame. I spent all my money on that lumber, and that's back when it was cheap. I built that little 12x12 frame expecting it to be my first cabin, but it still sits there today, just the frame, reminding me of my dream to build a cabin. Fast forward about 5 years from that cabin build attempt, the whole world was in shambles when it was in lockdown back in 2020. This is when my father and I decided to go on a hike on our remote, off-grid parcel of land. This remote piece of property has been owned by the family for years. We hiked along the stream bed deep into the woods. He showed me the exact spot where his father, my grandfather, wanted to build a cabin back in the 90s. The spot where he wanted to build his cabin is beautiful. The stream narrows down to a little trickle, and there's big steep banks above the stream where big cedars are growing. It's a really pretty spot. My grandfather never got to build his cabin there. That spot where he wanted to build it still lays there without a cabin. This rekindled my desire to build a cabin back in 2020 after learning about my grandfather and the spot he never built his cabin on. The remote piece of property is filled with history, even far beyond when our family got there. There's an old dam built with rocks, probably a couple hundred years old if I were to guess. It was built to pool up the stream, probably the source of power for a mill back in the day. While my father and I were hiking back towards the truck along the stream, I casted a line into the stream to test my luck. The cold stream on the property provides suitable habitat for fish such as native brook trout. Since then, we've hunted the land for deer. We've put up game cameras. We happened to capture 2 young bucks fighting during the rut. Apart from wildlife, this property offers a lot of natural resources as well. The property has hardwood, softwood, almost every kind of tree you could imagine. The stream bed has created a huge heath right in the middle of the property as well. It's crazy to see the difference between summer and winter. In the summer, it's a lush green field full of life, but in the winter, all the green fades away and the whole land is covered with a fresh, white blanket of snow. All these natural resources, along with the fact that the property is far away from the hustle and bustle of life, has made it the ideal spot for me to build an off-grid cabin. It was after that hike with my father out on the property that I started to search for a place to build a cabin. I ended up finding a perfect spot for a cabin along the stream, removed about 100 yards away up on a mound that overlooks the entire heath. Once I found this spot I wanted to build my cabin, I started cutting a trail from the nearest road directly to the plot. The property hasn't seen any human activity in the last 40 years, so it has all been overgrown. This made the task of cutting a trail to the cabin plot pretty difficult. Once I cut the trail from the nearest road over to the cabin plot, I recruited my brother Wyatt to help me do some cutting. I think it was the hottest day that August we decided to cut. Don't ask me why I chose that day to cut. I was motivated by the dream of building an off-grid cabin. I had a smaller truck at the time and I was able to take that trail that I cut all the way up to the house plot. If cutting a trail wasn't hard enough a task, clearing the cabin plot proved to be even harder. The state that we're in happens to be the most forested in the whole country. The whole landscape is covered with spruce, fir, pines, hardwood, you name it, we got it. The spot where I wanted to build my cabin was littered with spruce and fir that almost seem invasive. They're not invasive, but they seem that way. The spruce and fir grow up and choke out the sunlight from the other trees such as the pine and maple. So I gave my brother an echo chainsaw and I used my still and we laid down all the spruce and fir that we could. I wanted to leave all the pine and maple so they could grow big and strong and tall and that they could spread their branches out and absorb all the sunlight and grow nice and healthy. We cut a lot that summer. I remember being out there in the hottest part of the day, slaving away, throwing around a chainsaw and swinging around an axe, just trying to get a head start on this cabin plot. We made the mistake of piling up the brush in the summer. I try not to burn in the summer because of the fire hazard that it is, so all that brush just ended up sitting around until the winter. This is when I recruited my cousin Sam to come out and cut and burn with me in the winter. Now that most of that brush was burned up, I could see the cabin plot developing on top of that mound overlooking the stream. I could see my vision start to come to fruition. But there was one problem between me and an off-grid cabin, and that was mud. The trail I cut ended up being right through a mud hole. Water seems to pile up right here, right along the road. After long days of driving truck for UPS, I'd go out here with a chainsaw and a headlamp at night, and I'd cut logs to size, filling in the holes in the mud. I spent many a nights out there, cutting logs to size, throwing rocks in the mud, and eventually we got some gravel delivered out there to overlay my land bridge. I found a 14-foot long metal pipe I had, and I threw it right in the road, right where that water was bubbling up from the earth. I used that to channel all the water on one side of my land bridge to the other and back into the stream. That pipe, along with that gravel and the rocks and logs I threw in that road, made a perfect land bridge to where I was able to drive a 3/4 ton truck across it and up to the house plot. Now that I was able to drive a bigger truck across my land bridge and up to the cabin plot, I was able to make exponential progress cutting and burning. I spent a lot of time cutting and burning, but a lot of time just went to keeping the cabin plot organized. I would organize all my logs. I'd organize the cedar from the spruce and fir. I would organize the brush that needed to be burnt in different piles. I was able to drag a picnic table out there, which made it feel that much more like a campground now. With all this progress cutting and burning, and with the whole homestead organized, with all the logs piled up and with all the brush burned, I was finally able to see where my cabin might stand one day. I fell in love with this spot more and more as I envisioned an off-grid cabin sitting on that mound looking over the stream and the heath. Even over the courses of those summers, I was able to see the trees that I left, the pine and the maples, grow big and strong and tall and stretch out their limbs over the property, creating a canopy. And that canopy created a nice shade from the hot sun in the summer. Being on that mound over top of the stream, I was able to catch a lot of wind, which keeps all the bugs away in the summer as well. The more and more I went out there, the more and more progress I saw. I guess that's just how it works. I was able to find out what works and what doesn't work. Off-grid land development isn't easy, but you do get more efficient the more you do it. When the time came, back in warmer weather, I was able to put a new pipe in. This new pipe or culvert was a little bit bigger and was able to divert a lot more of the water bubbling up from the earth away from my land bridge and back into the stream. Putting this new pipe in became essential the more and more I drove up into the cabin plot. The land bridge was taking a lot of wear and tear, and the time came to buy some gravel. We ordered a bony batch of gravel, I think 2 or 3 inch rocks, which would settle in nice over top of that soft gravel. Now that I had easier access up to the cabin plot with a nice smooth surface to drive over, no more driving through the mud, I was able to bring my niece out there. She likes going out there to squirrel hunt and build shelters. We went out there one day after a windstorm. Unfortunately, the wind ended up taking some trees that I had isolated up on top of the hill. I was hoping some of those trees would grow nice and tall, but the wind ended up taking some of them out. The trees that I isolated didn't have the cover from the spruce and fir like they did before. We got the cabin plot all cleaned up and spent some time down by the stream. By this time, the stream had filled up with all the water from the rain season. As we got closer and closer to winter, the pond began to freeze over. At some point, I got a new set of neighbors out there, aka the Beavers. The Beavers dammed the stream up. This created a deep pool of water right in front of the dam that would probably be better suitable for the brook trout anyway. I love that the stream is able to host all kinds of wildlife, from the beavers to the brook trout. I've even seen ducks and geese out there. But the colder months led to greater opportunity to cut and burn. With snow on the ground, it makes it a lot safer to burn. Although safer to burn, it is a lot more of a pain in the neck. A lot of times when you pile up brush like that, it just becomes filled with ice and impossible to burn. But on the perfect winter day, you're able to burn quite a bit. I love the way this heath looks in the winter. It creates a beautiful scene, something almost straight out of a storybook. I usually spend the coldest months of the winter out on the lakes fishing. That means that not much progress is happening out on the homestead. But when springtime hits and all the ice melts away, you can be sure I'll be out on the homestead cutting and burning. Spending time out on the homestead cutting and burning might seem tedious, but I find it pretty relaxing. It's almost therapeutic to be throwing around a chainsaw, cutting down trees, and then cutting them to size, and then burning what's ever left over. To me, it's like painting on a blank canvas, except you're doing it with a mound of dirt and earth and trees. I'm really starting to see the whole thing come together. I've got the cabin plot to a point where the pines are isolated and growing nice and big and tall. The oaks are isolated, they're growing big and tall. There's a nice breeze coming in from the stream. A bunch of sunlight is coming in from overhead now without all those spruce and fir there. And I can finally see where I'm going to put an off-grid cabin one day. I left the homestead with it being fully prepped to build a cabin. Not sure when you were out here last, but this is that spot I've been cutting. Got all these big pines and maples isolated so they can grow nice and big. But I've got a nice little house plot here. I've had countless fires. All kinds of firewood for whoever wants that. That was that pile that you and I cut and laid there. I just burned that the other day. But the goal is to have a cabin right here and be able to see that heath down there. I wish I had more time to spend out there, but I just don't. I'm active duty Air Force, stationed in the South. I really like what I'm doing in the Air Force, and I could see myself doing it for quite a while, but you can be sure that I'll be using every chance to take leave that I can to go work on the homestead. One day I'll fulfill my dream and my grandfather's dream to build an off-grid cabin out in the woods there. But until that cabin is built, it will still be a place for my loved ones to go and experience nature. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more.